Today's episode is brought to you by Bet Online. Bet Online has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. Bet Online, it's where the game starts. And guess what, folks? It's Monday. We're doing a crossover here at Locked On MLB. In fact, we're going to be doing crossovers for the next bunch of MLBs, which would be with our new friend, you've been here for a while, Mr. Millard Thomas is going to be our guest here on Locked On MLB. I'm your host, Paul Francis Sullivan. Please call me Sully. This show is available wherever you get your podcasts, and you can follow us on Twitter at Locked On MLB Pod. Same handle on Instagram. I'm your pal Sully. If you look down there, you can follow me at Sully Baseball on Twitter, Sully Baseball Podcast on Instagram. And my Monday partners, it's not Tuesdays with Maury. It's going to be Mondays with Millard.
Oh,
Millard Thomas, who's been a frequent guest on this podcast. I've been on your podcast. You've been on my podcast. Yeah. The host of Locked On Diamondbacks. And I'll say it. I'm brave enough to say it. Uh-oh. One of my friends.
Wow.
In the Locked On world. And one of my favorite hosts on here. I'm glad that we're going to try to do this a bunch of Mondays and have, although is this going out live to the world right now?
No.
Can people watch this right now?
I hope not. I think I have record only, so hopefully it's not being broadcast.
Well, either way, I didn't know if this was going out live and flown out to Saturn. But hey, Millard, let's talk a little bit about here. So we're wrapping up February. Pitchers and catchers should have reported. Minor leaguers have reported. And hey, just what are your thoughts right now? What's going to happen? I mean, I know you don't know for sure because neither one of us are in the negotiation room, but are they going to come to their senses or what?
Honestly, I don't know. I've just kind of stopped caring about the lockout negotiations. When it first started, I was the guy beating all the updates on my pod, trying to do all the information. But over the last few weeks, I've just kind of stopped caring about it because either we're going to have a season or we're not going to have a season, or maybe we'll have half a season. We don't know at this point. The players and the owners, they just keep going back and forth. They will submit one proposal and then they'll change it by $2 million and then submit another one. And then someone gets angry. Someone leaves the table early. Overall, I just want baseball to come back. I don't really care about the negotiations at this point. I know the players are fighting for a lot. I know the owners are not trying to concede, but at the end of the day, I just want to see the sport of baseball back. I'm not sure what the timeline is. I've kind of just stopped following the updates because eventually I'm just going to wake up and they're going to tell me either we're having a season or we're not.
Yeah, I mean, intellectually, and I'm going to talk about this. If you listen to Locked On MLB, I'm going to talk a little bit about this tomorrow, that I think we need to have the basis of negotiation start with honesty and reality. And if the owners are claiming they're losing money, I call a gigantic BS on that. And if we can't start negotiating if one side is not dealing with reality, but that's me making an intellectual conversation and making a point of here's something that could help negotiations. Be honest, but as a baseball fan and also, quite frankly, someone who makes a little bit of money talking about baseball on the Locked On Podcast Network, it's easier to sell Built Bars when we actually have ball games to talk about. I mean, I've been having a blast this offseason talking about, hey, what if this trade happened? What if this?
Yeah,
let's do a
I
game
love doing
show.
Those.
But at some point, you got to say, let's talk about what's happening on the field. And at some point, I think it would be absolutely disastrous if baseball doesn't start playing soon. I'm going to read you a text. My cousin Dave, who I love dearly, and he may be listening to this right now. He is my cousin, but in my mind, he's a sibling. I mean, we're that close. I mean, and we text every day. I lived with him for a little while. He's that kind of a relative. And he sent, we literally send some sort of a text every single day to each other. And he wrote to me, and he has two kids who are roughly the same age as my kids. And he said, my kids are both avid sports fans, but MLB ranks last in their order of preference.
Oh, for sure.
With the game slipping further behind other sports, both sides dig in their heels. And while I understand intellectually, I'm vehemently pro-player and anti-owner on a lot of stuff, I am also understanding that thinking they can just expect people to come running back. I'm going to come running back. You're going to come running back. But there's a whole audience out there that they're not tapping into that won't care, that will not care. If American Idol got canceled tomorrow, it will not affect my life in any way, shape, or form. And for that, there's a whole section of the country that if baseball doesn't exist, they'll be like, oh, and then move on with their life. And baseball could be in real danger of that in this world, to think that people are just going to come back. There's too much in our Netflix queue as it is.
Yeah, baseball's problem is their own arrogance, is feeling like they just kind of have a stranglehold. Like they kind of still feel like they're back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s in terms of their popularity. And because they look at their profits, and even though they might claim poor, all the numbers say like baseball's as profitable as any sport. I believe they still make more money than the NBA. Like baseball is doing great. So from the owner's pocket standpoint, they don't really see an issue with the game. They don't see an issue with marketing toward younger fans probably as much, because their pockets are still full. They're still making money. So it's hard to say, yeah, we might be, leaving out certain segments of an audience. But overall, if we still are hitting our numbers every season, if our ratings are still looking fine, if our wallets are still fat, like why should we make any changes to our game, to our system, to how things are structured? Because at the end of the day, we're still coming out on the positive end of things. And that's basically all the owners care about.
All right, and Hannah Kaiser made a great point on Yahoo Sports that if baseball teams are losing money now after making record profits over the last couple of decades, then why wouldn't they fire Rob Manfred?
Mm-hmm.
Why would he still have a job? Because they've pushed out commissioners in the past. Just ask
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Fay Vincent that. So it makes little sense that they're taking the tactics they're losing, but they can't lose because it's a point I've made many times. Think about, like, right now, I am, there's about 5 or 6 shows I'm behind on.
Mm-hmm.
And every 2 minutes someone says, "Hey, are you watching the return of Bennett Shamsai? Have you heard, Millard? Have you heard of the show The Return of Bennett Shamsai on
I have
Netflix?"
not.
That people are going nuts
Mm-mm.
over it. Because I made it up, but there's
Okay.
so many shows out there
Makes
that you
sense.
probably said, "Yeah, that sounds like a show." There's so many shows that you could be like, "Yeah, I hear people are saying about it." And of course, people watch it like it's 50 episodes. Oh yeah, it dropped yesterday. I've watched all 50. They're amazing. Spoiler alert. And there's so many shows are so, like, are so, there's so many great shows. And then I'm also catching up on my Oscar watching. And then,
Okay.
there's all these other stuff that's going on. If for some people who aren't baseball mad like me, to
Mm-hmm.
say, "Oh, we're going to remove this from your queue," you're kind of, actually, it's kind of a relief. I don't have to watch that right now, 'cause I'm still catching up on everything else. That is the media world that baseball is existing in right now. And the arrogance that they think that they can step out and expect people to come running back in line. It's like, no, no, I'm going to be watching Book of Boba Fett and Mandalorian and the British Baking Show and Lupin and what other shows are out there. And then
Squid Game.
Ozark, you
Oh,
know,
Ozark's good.
Ozark's great. And the new season of Mrs. Maisel. I mean, there are too many. And baseball can't get out of line and think that people are going to come running back to them.
Yeah, it's not surprising that you see the owners treating their fans like this, because you look at some of their teams, how they treat their own superstars. When you look at the Red Sox trading Mookie Betts because of who knows financial reasons, and you see the Nolan Arenado deals of the world, like there's so many times where a superstar gets moved just because of fake financial reasons, when these teams are pulling in money and the appreciation of these franchises keep going up and up, and yet they can't afford to pay some of their star players. It really doesn't make any sense. And when you combine that with the fan bases of these franchises as well, like the teams that, the Rockies fans, like seeing Nolan Arenado go and get traded for like no reason, and then the return you
For
get back
nothing. And
for nothing. That's the worst part about these superstar deals. You move off the guy who is the face of your franchise, pulling in all the money for your tickets. He's on the cover of everything. Then you get nothing back. That's why I really don't understand when it comes to most of these superstar trades, is the fact that they literally get nothing back in return.
Well, your team's the Diamondbacks. You traded
Mm-hmm.
away Goldschmidt to St. Louis a couple of years ago.
Mm-hmm.
They at least got a couple of decent players back from it. It
Yeah.
wasn't a total bust, but at the same time, you think you're building towards something, and look at we're taking quick. We're going to just talk about a couple things. I'm a few years older than you,
A little bit.
and I remember the scorched earth of 1994 and 1995.
Mm.
And there was one thing that came out positive in that time that brought baseball's popularity back. But another thing that they did back then that they're still doing now, which is doing the equivalent of pointing a bazooka at their foot and pulling the trigger. And that's not a smart thing to do.
Mm-mm.
That messes up your foot. And then you're going to have to fix it.
Can't walk.
Just imagine doing that to your car. If you did that to your car, then you should go to Rock Auto. This episode is brought to you in part by Rock
Whoa,
Auto.
what a
And with the
segue.
ever increasing numbers and makes and models, it's impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts you need. Why endure often pointless and seemingly intimidating question and wait for the person behind the counter to order the parts on the computer, and they're choosing only the brand their warehouse happens to carry? That's dumb. You've got computers with access to Rock Auto at home and in your pocket and maybe even on your watch. Save time and money by using Rock Auto. Rock Auto is a family business serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. Rock Auto's prices are reliably low for every customer. They have everything you can need, from brake parts, tail lamps, motor oil, even a new carpet. Go explore their easy-to-use website today to find the solution for your auto parts needs. Go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck. Right, Locked On in their How Did You Hear About Us box, so they know that we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need are at rockauto.com. Okay, we are back doing Mondays with Millard, the first version of Mondays with. Don't you like it? You guys, it's a new thing here. We're crossing over Locked On Diamondbacks and Locked On MLB. Why are we doing that? Because I like Millard Thomas.
Thank you. Appreciate
I
that.
like you.
I like you too,
You
Sully.
are my friend.
I don't have enough of those.
I know.
So that means a lot.
Yes, I was told to be your friend.
It's a contract.
You're like
It's in the
you're the
lockdown
foreign
contract.
exchange student, and I was told to be your friend. No. I remember back in 94 and 95. Were you even born then?
No, I was 3 years away from being a thought.
Okay. So you were born into a world where, this is the first time you're experiencing a labor strike
Mm-hmm.
in baseball. Let me just transition for one thing. I have a point I teased, but
Okay.
my family moved to Europe in the early 1980s when I was a kid, and I lived a couple of years in Switzerland.
Oh wow.
And in 1981, I was there. I was already an out of my mind baseball fan, and it was hard to follow baseball in a pre-internet world in Switzerland. Getting the International Herald Tribune, which would just have the line scores of the previous day. And I had all my mom's old baseball books from the 50s. So I basically became a baseball historian. I'd sit there reading about the Yankees in the 1950s. That summer, we visited America for about 5 or 6 weeks, I think it was. We were just going to come back and spend like a holiday. And all I wanted to do the summer of 1981, there were two things I wanted to do. I wanted to see the movie Superman 2,
Mm-hmm.
because it involved the Krypton criminals breaking out from the Phantom Zone, and they'd set that up in Superman 1. And I wanted to see a baseball game live. I came back. They were on strike.
Dang.
It was the 1981 strike.
They did you dirty.
And I didn't get to go see a game at Fenway Park. At the end of our trip there, the strike ended, and I wound up going to a game at Shea Stadium with my cousins. And we saw the Phillies play the Mets. And I got to see Pete Rose and Mike Schmidt play. It's the only time I ever saw Pete Rose play live. And it was Mets hat day. So I was able to get a Met hat at Shea Stadium. Even though I wasn't a Met fan, it was still cool. So I did get to see a game, but I was like, I come all the way here, there's no baseball. But the World Series being canceled in 94, spring training turning into the fiasco with replacement players in 95.
Mm-hmm.
I really didn't think we were ever going to see a fiasco like that ever again. It was one of those things like, you would think lessons would be learned.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not there yet.
Not
They're
yet.
not using replacement players. Thank goodness. We haven't canceled the World Series. Thank goodness. The thing that saved baseball was steroids.
Mm-hmm.
And every time there's been a major problem in baseball, they've turned to a way to increase offense, whether it was using a tighter baseball in the 1920s, where suddenly the home run champ went from going from 15 to 60, and ERAs went from going from like 1 to 7 in like 1 year. And then the pitchers were dominating too much in the 60s, so they created the designated hitter and they lowered the mound. And then baseball needed anything to bring fans back. Ripken did it for about an hour and a half. And then they said, hey, if people like big muscular dudes hitting home runs, what steroids? I don't know what you're speaking of. And suddenly baseball was back by 1998. It was dead in the water in 95, and it was back better than ever in 98. And they built all these new stadiums to the point where Dodger Stadium is now the second oldest stadium in the National League. Coors Field is the third oldest stadium in the National League. And because of steroids. And we're going to see a new steroid era. They're going to look the other way at steroids. And when baseball comes back, we get the universe. It's going to be a combination. They're going to all three of the things. They're going to get a new ball, make the DH universal, and you're going to see players showing up looking like Drax from Guardian of the Galaxy. Hell, they may look like Groot. And here we go. We're going to have a new steroid era, and it's going to save baseball.
Yeah, well, I hope so. I'm not too sure if we'll actually get that. I assume we'll probably put some drug testing plans back in place just because, I mean, you could tell these players that they could use steroids and we're going to look the other way, do the look the other way thing like we did during the steroid era. But then when these players start to come up on the Hall of Fame ballots, we go through all these controversies again. I don't know if the players want to actually go through that whole process of being the new Barry Bonds for this generation. So even though it sounds good in practicality, the steroid era, I would love to have it back. I don't even know if the players want to participate in we're going to look away that the baseball likes to do, because I think at the end of the day, it's actually going to hurt a lot of the players' legacies if they care about that, of course, if they care about these barbershop debates, because you never know, they might. So I think players, I think they actually might stay away from the steroid era just because of all the negativity and the criticism that just surrounds players that use PEDs nowadays. So I think they might stay away from that. But the universal DH, I'm glad that they bring it back. And if they want to add more offense to the game, let's ban the universal DH. Joey Gallo, I'm all the way with you. Let's make the shift in illegal defense.
I am all for doing things to speed up the game. And as I'm going to mention tomorrow's episode of Locked On MLB, and I've said this before, pace of play does not equal length of game. Those are not synonymous. You can have a fast-paced 4-hour game and you can have a boring as hell 2-hour game. They're not the same thing. The pace of play is the pace of the game on the field, how much action there is as opposed to inaction. That's the pace of play. One of my favorite movies of all time is Goodfellas, which is nearly 3 hours long, and I don't think there's a boring moment in the entire movie. I've seen some 90-minute movies that are so boring I want to grab the nearest fork and shove it in my eyeball, so I have to go. It makes me stop watching it. It's not the same thing. Now, baseball did something horribly wrong in the 90s, and I think it hurt baseball's relationship with African American fans specifically, but I think with fans in general. And there was a time in the early 90s where you saw the rise of players like Bonds, Griffey, Frank Thomas. Ricky Henderson was the best player in baseball. You had the Braves teams with the Maddox, Glav, and Smoltz. You had the Expos teams, with Pedro Martinez and eventually Vladdy Guerrero, all these great stars in the early 90s. Actually, Vladdy Guerrero was a little bit later. But the point I'm making is you had all these amazing stars, some of the best players in the history of baseball. And because there was so much antagonism between the players and the owners, the players were not marketed and treated as heroes at that time because, I guess in the owner's mind, that builds them up too much and we're trying to knock them all down. At the same time, the NBA had Jordan, and not just Jordan, but David Robinson, Charles Barkley, Patrick Ewing, Sean Kemp, and all of those players became household names to the point where they can appear in a movie with Bugs Bunny. and everybody knew who they were. You knew when the dream team came around, yeah, it was Jordan and Magic and Bird, but it was also Stockton and Malone. It
Yeah.
was also David Robinson. It was also Scottie Pippen. Scottie Pippen was the second best player on the Bulls and was more well known than Ken Griffey Jr., who was the best player in baseball.
Mm-hmm.
And think about what they have now: Trout,
Boring.
Mookie Betts.
Love him.
Think about all the superstars who are in there right now who are extraordinary. Soto of the Washington
Tatis.
Nationals. But all of them. Tatis Jr., right. All these amazing players throughout the game right now. Judge, who has the great name. He looks like Arnold Schwarzenegger, plays in New York. All of these remarkable players. And yes, they're super popular with their fan bases. Of course they are. But do any of them have the crossover appeal of the biggest NBA stars who are always so good at promoting their stars to make a star league? And to me, look at, is any baseball player going to be as big as LeBron? Probably not. But why is Mike Trout able to go into a mall food court anywhere in this country and not be recognized? I'll tell you why. No one goes to the malls anymore. But the point is they could walk down the street anywhere outside of Orange County, and unless he's wearing a uniform, no one would know who the hell he is.
But I think there's a combination of things and variables as to why that might be, because I think the only crossover star we really have that could be on an NBA guy's level is Shohei Ohtani, who I think had the highest selling jersey of all of sports last season. Like Ohtani, because he's a spectacle. He's doing things that we've never seen in the sport of baseball. So he's an outlier to the rest of the stars in the game. But someone like Mike Trout specifically, I feel like a reason why he's a little bit, probably less recognized than other stars in baseball, just because I think also his personality is a guy that's not really going hard on social. I don't really think he promotes his own brand as much in baseball. They try to promote his brand, but I don't think he's a very marketable guy. Someone like Mookie Betts is probably more popular. Some of the other stars of today, like the Tatises of the world, like they're super fun, super electrifying. And Mike Trout's a great player, but I don't think he has the kind of game or the personality that can translate like an NBA guy. Those
he'd
guys
be like
NBA,
David Robinson. He'd be like
he's
David Robinson.
Yeah, it's more like a David Robinson or like a Tim Duncan, where just quiet. Like everyone knew who Tim Duncan was, but he never had a big personality. I mean, he didn't even go to the NBA 75, top greatest thing. Like Tim Duncan doesn't like to be in the limelight. Neither does Mike Trout. But on your point, the other stars, like there's definitely a disconnect with those guys walking down the street as opposed to the top stars in the NBA or other sports, even the NFL, something like that.
Yeah, I have a couple of thoughts about this, but I think that baseball is going to have to do something to sort of juice up the game. And if they're not going to use performance enhancing drugs and players are like, all right, we want to stay away from that, they're going to stay with that. We need something else. So if they're not going to use illegal performance enhancing drugs, why not a Built Bar? Built Bars are the best tasting protein bars out there. And do you know what? Have you tried the Puffs? Maybe they'll all be testing positive for Puffs. If you haven't tried them, you're missing out on one of the best Built Bars ever. They're the first ever protein-infused marshmallows. that almost sounds like we're testing for protein-infused marshmallows. But no, they're legal. They're fluffy. They're marshmallowy. They're not just a protein bar. There's a treat, and they're covered with 100% real chocolate. They're a fan favorite. These Puffs. They got incredible flavors. I can't even say it. That's how good they are. Yummy cinnamon churro. That, by the way, is also my wrestling name. Coconut marshmallow, banana cream pie. They're so good. They're going to be your new favorite. Built Bars are covered in 100% real chocolate. Did I mention 100% real chocolate? Yeah, the Puffs are included. Low calorie, high protein. Replace your candy bars with these. They're better. A typical candy bar can be anywhere between 200 and 300 calories. Why do I have to give that bit of information? No, are you under the impression that candy bars are good for you? They're literally candy bars. Okay? But Built Bars, forget it. Go to Built.com. Scroll down to the macros chart. You'll be blown away. They got high protein, high fiber, low calories, low carbs. Most Built Bars contain 103 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 grams net carb, 17 grams of protein. Remember that there will be a quiz. Compare that to a candy bar, which is a candy bar. Hey, what's your favorite flavor?
I love the cookies and cream because I'm just a sucker for Oreo-based
That's
stuff.
great. Oh man. And by the way, the new flavor this month is white chocolate cookies and cream.
Ooh, I didn't even
I
know
don't
about
know.
that, Sully.
My favorite one is raspberry. I love the cookies and cream. I love the mint brownie, the coconut almond. They're all great. I love the raspberry because I like the tangy raspberry mixed with the chocolate. It's delicious. But they're all good. And you know what? They're coming out with new flavors all the time. If they think of a flavor that say, we're gonna make it, it's gonna be delicious, and then it'll be good for you. That's how they operate. They said make it delicious first, then figure out how to make it healthy.
Mm,
I don't know how they do it, but they do it every time. Do you know what the worst tasting Built Bar is?
they don't have one.
Exactly. It's all a tie for second after raspberry. Go to built.com, use promo code LOCK15, get 15% off your order. Use promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at built.com. Hey, sing that song with me. BuiltBar.com.
Boom.
We're here with Millard Thomas. It's Mondays with Millard. We just had the Olympics, and dozens of people watched them.
Yeah, I don't think I watched one event during the Olympics. It
The
was
Olympics
really
used to
bad.
be like the biggest thing in the world. Remember that?
Summer Olympics are still popular. I just think the Winter Olympics are not very
I
popular.
love the Winter Olympics.
Mm.
I love skiing. I love watching skiing. Maybe because I lived in Switzerland for a couple of years, but like when I see downhill skiing, I think it's thrilling. When you see just the way it just to me,
Mm.
I think it's super exciting. And just some of the weird things like the toboggan, like it's all this weird, like I don't know what they're doing.
Yeah, the sledding with the rifle or whatever that one
Oh yeah,
is.
well that's the that's the there's the sport where they go skiing and then they shoot.
Yeah, whatever
Um,
that whatever that
there's
stuff is.
there's a James Bond film called The Spy Who Loved Me, which opens with James Bond on skis, and his ski poles are also a gun. And I think the creator of the
Jesus.
biathlon saw The Spy Who Loved Me and said, "Let's take the opening of that movie and turn it into an Olympic sport." But one of the things that the Olympics, at least in the past, have always done well, and I'm going to bring this back to baseball,
Okay.
is they get you sucked into these sports that you would never watch ever, but they do it by getting you sucked in with the story of the person. You want this person to win at curling because of this story or that story, and you root for them. And I think baseball is you can get people to root for things that they don't care about and get into something if they know the backstory behind it. So when you watch a sports movie, you're always rooting for the person. You're rooting for Hoosiers because you know their backstory. You're rooting for Miracle because you learn their backstory. You root for Major League or whatever because you learn their backstory and you get to know them as characters. And beyond just getting to know their brand and get to know, hey, this person does this or that, if you like the people and you like the backstory, people got into the Cubs and the Red Sox winning because there was a backstory behind them not winning. Well, those easy narratives are over. And so people have to start rolling up their sleeves and not just trying to get people to show their brand to be, Instagram influencers. Get people liking individual players because they like them. They want them to succeed. And I think that's something baseball has to start to do a lot better than they're doing right now, which is get people. And I don't have it. I don't have like a bunch of great backstories written
Yeah.
right now. I don't have a pile of it. Okay, let me just tell you why Joey Votto is going to win this game for his sick aunt or whatever. But there's stories like that we can build up. People followed Jim Abbott when he showed up with just one hand and threw a freaking no-hitter with one hand. But we can't keep relying on Jim Abbott's to show up in the world.
No, this is a really interesting point you're making, Sully, because I never really thought about this. Because when you compare baseball to like football and basketball, you're not really preconceived to these minor league players and prospects before they make it to the major league level,
Mhm.
like you would be with NFL or NBA. Because you look at the NFL, college basketball is huge, especially down south, ingratiated in so many fans. So you're watching
And
these
college
guys for
basketball as well.
yeah, so you're watching these guys for multiple years in college football. You already know everything about them. You know about their background, their life story, whatever, yada yada. Same with basketball. You're looking at all these highlights. You're following these prospects year round. But when you look at baseball, like of course you look at MLB.com, Keith Law's top rankings or whatever, but you actually don't know anything about these
Who are
players. You
they?
just know the statistical resumes or whatever the blurb is on MLB.com. But How many people have actually watched a game of, one of their top prospects before they make it to the major league level? I haven't seen a lot of tape of a lot of these minor league prospects for the D-backs. Like, I'm just being honest. But for basketball, for NFL, like, I've seen all those highlights of what they did in college before they make it to the pro level. And I think that's, like what you said, where baseball is kind of missing. We're not preconceived to these players before they make it to the pro level, as we are in other sports.
I made a reference to American Idol earlier. What do they do in American Idol? Did they just have them come up and sing Adele and walk out? Or they create a little backstory. They're like, oh, this person was born with no knees or whatever.
Yeah, you
Or
got to
this
cry
person,
first.
like, oh, he's from this poor neighborhood. This person from a military family. I'm sure if you go through, you can find lots of stories about these players, about people who have dealt with adversity. Hell, you're trying to tell me you can't come up with stories about people who came from incredibly poor towns in the Dominican Republic, or went through horrible poverty in the United States, or whatever, that they could, or this person dealt with this piece of adversity. This person's just a funny, charming guy. This person is, as Sean Doolittle, I guess he played for the Mariners last year, who's from a military family and does a lot for, raising money to build houses for veterans, house homeless veterans. There are people who do stuff, and that, not just charitable stuff, but get to know Joey Votto was funny. Brian Wilson, when he was with the Giants, was this weird kind of Zach Galifianakis funny dude.
Yeah.
And to find who are the funny people, who are the people who went through adversity, who are the people who are charming, who are the people who you can't help but root for, and find those people. I was asked this as a guest on a podcast. I said, what would you do to get people who don't follow baseball to get into baseball? I said, like, find the best backstories and put those up front. Because you root for American Idol, you root for British baking, you root for curling based upon who are those people. Oh, I want them to win because blankety blank. We got into the freaking America's Cup in the 80s. That's sailing. Because we got to learn the backstories of the sailors.
Interesting. I never knew about that.
And so it was huge. For about 2 years, people were hooked on the America's Cup. Sailing. You can't find a slower pace of play than sailing.
I'm gonna have to get into that. Well, that's part of the reason why, like, the MLB draft is, like, not very interesting to watch. It's not a spectacle like the NFL, NBA, because all those guys are unknowns. Like, I don't know anything about these college prospects or some high schooler in the middle of Iowa. Like, I didn't watch that dude play. I don't know anything about him. So how can I get hyped for something where it's just me looking at a whole bunch of unknowns and just basically names on a board?
Hey, I mean, listeners of Locked On MLB know I've mentioned this before, but this is my way to create, because the NBA draft and the NFL draft are artificially created shows.
Yeah,
we have a draft, but they turn it into a big show because, as you said, we know who the big stars are in both of them, and so it becomes something that you want to watch. But the MLB, you're drafting this guy from
I have no idea.
This guy from a high school in Florida, and this guy went to University of Tennessee. See you in 3 years, or maybe never.
Yeah, like maybe.
My idea for that artificially created big show is, and hear me out, everyone, I'm mentioning it again. The waiver wire rules, where you can block trades after the trade deadline. Here's what Commissioner Sully does. Waiver wire rules from opening day to the end of the season. You can block trades all year, except for 2 days. 1 day at the 1/3 mark, 1 day at the 2/3 marks. And for 24 hours, you could trade Mike Trout for this fork if you wanted to. You can't block anything. And that you got teams building up for that moment, because you saw when you knew the lockout was about to start, there was a frenzy of trades and deals and trades and everything happening. If you can artificially create that for 24 hours, okay, and it almost becomes a thing. Like, rumors start that when at the 1/3 mark, at like Memorial Day and the first day of August, you have a 24-hour period where you have the commissioner there. Your people are filling out trade things. They have to turn it into the commissioner with a big ass clock that counts it down. And for 24 hours, you have frenzy of trades, deals, made, everything, boom, boom, boom. And they're players you've heard of. It's names you've heard of. It's like trading baseball cards or trading your fantasy league. because that's the difference between the NBA and the NFL and Major League Baseball is we don't know who these people are, but you do know if Javier Baez gets traded during the window or Max Scherzer gets traded during the window.
Yeah,
that to me, I
yeah,
think it's worth it.
I think that's something that baseball is missing. It's like something along your point, like the constant need to check your phone on Twitter for those updates. I think the kind of idea you're proposing would lend to that formula, I guess, because when you look at the NBA when free agency is about to start, all those NBA fans, they're on Twitter constantly refreshing their phone. They got notifications on for Wojnarowski and Shams because they know at any moment a big bomb could be dropped, someone could be signed, someone could be traded. And it's just not the same as baseball, especially
No.
like the last few off seasons. I don't know what happened, but like the winter meetings used to be like the creme de la creme. Like, yeah, we might be slow the first few days of free agency, but once we got to the winter meetings, we know big deals are going to go down.
And they didn't.
And
They
that just
didn't.
hasn't happened anymore. It just doesn't happen. I remember as a kid watching Albert Pujols and CJ Wilson sign with the Angels. I was like, oh my God, this is so freaking cool. And it's like now it's like you get one big signing every like 3 weeks during the MLB offseason. It's just too spread out. Like I'm not going to be on my phone constantly checking that because I feel like it's just too long. And I think the lockout was actually kind of good because it created that frenzy. Like
and that's why you have to create that artificial sense of urgency. But the other thing, and you pointed at this, and we'll wrap up here. I'll mention this in tomorrow's show as well. Baseball should be the sport of the internet age because they have daily content.
Yeah, literally.
Every day, checking your phone for this and that, and they're not embracing it. Baseball was the king when the main form of getting your sports information was either by newspaper, because baseball is great for narratives, baseball is great, it's great for story writing and everything like that, and also the radio. It's ideal for radio. Baseball is tailor-made for radio. Football is tailor-made for television. Left to right, they're built-in commercial breaks. You can build it up once a week. Yeah, it's no doubt that football started becoming king when television was king. The NBA is doing a lot better at adapting to the world of the internet than baseball is. But the NBA can't produce content as fast as baseball can. And the fact that baseball doesn't understand that is like you are giving up the chance to have the golden goose. And I can't solve it all.
Yeah, and the TV thing has been an issue for them too because of all the blackouts that they have. You can't even watch your local team because it's always blacked out. It's like I want to watch baseball, man.
I know, and it's like I've been saying this for years. You create a Venn diagram of where people. So I want young eyeballs watching my game. Well, where are young eyeballs watching? They're not watching television on the couch. They're watching their device. And what are young fans most interested in? Their local teams. So let's make sure they can't watch their local teams on their device. If you create a Venn diagram of where the most popular way to watch a game and most popular teams to watch, that middle part would be your home teams on your device. And if you're blacking them out, and I know someone's going to say, well, if you download this VPN and you move this over, forget it. They've already moved their thumb over and they've hit Netflix. The second you've added another thing for them to download, then screw it. I'll just watch Amazon Prime.
Attention spans are too short. You can't have too many steps for this young generation. We're not.
I can watch anything I want if I go like that or that. If you're going to add anything to it, bye-bye. I got too much of my queue as it is.
Yeah, exactly. Baseball, they have a lot of things to fix. I'm hoping we get pretty radical with the sport over the next few years. I'm ready to change the whole game, basically. I'm ready to shorten systems. I'm ready to put pitch clock, electronic strike zone. I'm ready for pretty much anything.
I want electronic strike zones. Insane that we don't have it. I want a pitch clock. I'm all for realignment. People saying I'm too traditional because I didn't want the universal DH. I'm for realignment. If we're going to say there's no difference between the American League and National League, then what are we doing? Let's have 4 divisions: North, South, Central, West. Boom. We'll figure out which one. Each one has 8 teams, and we figure out the playoff system and everything like that. Each one has 8 teams. Means we have to expand by 2, which means we have to figure out the stadium issue with Oakland and Tampa, and then put 2 new teams in there. We can afford to do it. This is the longest time we've ever gone without an expansion. And because you've never had expansion in your lifetime. The D-backs been around as long as you've been around.
Yeah, they were like right when I was born. So
you have a beard.
Yeah, and I have a beard. Yes,
You have a beard.
I've had this for a while.
Yeah,
The
the
beard.
fact you've had a beard for a while shows that we haven't had an expansion for a while. You are the
Mhm.
face of expansion.
Oh, thank you.
And so I'm all for realignment. But we also have to make sure all games are available easily on all devices. And we have to build up the stars, not just by creating a fun Nike ad or a fun Instagram account, but getting people to root for the fans, root for the players, because then you build them up and it becomes a narrative to follow. I
How
think
do
we
you feel
just,
about shortening the season though?
I'm actually fine with that.
Okay.
I'm fine. Look at, here's I have another thing that, I mean, this is my most radical thing, and we're running out of time here, but I've been talking
Mhm.
about this for a while. I think the season should end on Labor Day.
Mm.
It's a summer sport, and people stop paying attention at the best month of the season, which is down the stretch. I think if you have down the stretch be August, and then the playoffs be played in September with the World Series the first week of October, when they're still playing in weather that resembles baseball. I think I'm all for that. I have no
Yeah.
problem with that, and it
Could the
may
play
save some injuries.
Yeah, because the
And
playoffs definitely bleed into the NFL and NBA schedule too much at the end of the
yeah,
season.
and if your local team is in it, you pay attention. But if your local team isn't in it, people look away. Except for me,
Yeah.
I'm a unicorn. I watch it no matter what. But most people don't. So why scream at the tides? Have Labor Day. My suggestion was Labor Day is the day you play the wild card game. We have it off. You have a game on. There's a champion. Then and after that, people go back to school. People go back to work, or their vacation's over. And if your team is in it, you're going to be super into it. If your team's not in it, you moved on to football anyway.
True. And you get to talk about it with your friends who you haven't seen all summer long too.
And you can listen to it on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day. And by the way, thanks so much for making us your first listen at Locked On MLB, or maybe your first listen is Locked On Diamondbacks with Millard Thomas.
Ooh.
But I got to say, if that, because that's got to be your first and second listen. What's your third listen going to be? Easy for you to say. That should be Locked On MLB Prospects, hosted by friend of the podcast, Lindsey Crosby. He's a prospect encyclopedia, and he's going deep on the MLB stars of tomorrow. That show is free and available wherever you get your podcast. Hey, Millard Thomas, here on the premiere episode of Mondays with Millard.
Oh
Tell
yeah.
people where they can follow you.
Yeah, follow me on Twitter. My personal account is at CreatorThomas24, or just type in the search bar at Lockdown Diamondbacks. I'm sure you can find us on both Twitter and Instagram.
And I'm your pal Sully. I'm at Sully Baseball on Twitter, Sully Baseball Podcast on Instagram, and we're at MLB, Lockdown MLB Pods on both Twitter and Instagram. Crossing over, Lockdown MLB, Lockdown Diamondbacks. We have an alliance. And I don't even know what I'm doing here. I was trying to
The
do
fist
some
bump.
sort of let's do a
There you
fist
go.
pump here. No, right there. Come on,
Oh,
Give
right
me,
there.
give me a
This is
fist
tough.
pump. Give me a fist. For those of
Boom.
you watching on YouTube, boom. We did a nice little hairy knuckle fist pump with Millard Thomas of Locked On Diamondbacks, your pal Sully on Locked On MLB here on the 28th day of February 2022. I'm your host, Paul Francis Sullivan. We're moving into March. We better have some baseball pretty soon. Call me Sully.